Good morning. I'm told that we can start even without the jingle, so I'll get us going. Welcome to this panel discussion this morning where we're going to be talking about defence. Is it the long-awaited lever for reindustrialization? Perhaps we could say it a little bit more directly and a bit more provocatively. Will warfare save our manufacturing industry in France, Germany, across Europe? My name is Leo Klim. I am the Paris correspondent of the German magazine Der Spiegel. And we're going to talk about this major subject which brings together geopolitics and economics in today's world. So, against the backdrop of the war in Ukraine and the US disengagement from defence, it's interesting to see that Renault in France and Mercedes in Germany are starting to manufacture military drones. We'll perhaps look at that question towards the end of the panel discussion. But first of all, I'm going to introduce our various speakers. I hope that it will not just be the fact that we're all men that stands out. Sorry about that. But we have a panel that's coordinated by Lionel Reingaud from the Cercle des Économistes. He's right on the left-hand side as you look at the stage. He is a professor in economics in Paris-Nanterre University and specialist in structural policy and sustainable growth. Alongside him, we have Philippe Mills, who is the CEO of the Public Development Bank in France, which is known as SVIL. It's part of the Caisse des Dépôts group, and it's the seventh largest French bank by balance sheets, and it funds infrastructure projects and export contracts. We have Thomas Silberhorn, with whom we can speak German. He's not going to speak German actually, but he is a member of the German Parliament, the Bundestag. He is part of the CDU-CSU group led by Chancellor Merz. He was previously Secretary of State for Defence under Ursula von der Leyen, who at the time was Minister for Defence. Alongside him we have Olivier Girard, who is the Director of Accenture for EMEA defence issues. He's a member of the Management Committee for the EMEA region for Accenture, which is a significant management consultancy which provides support for business in this major industrial area. Just on my right, we have Pierrot Vengou, who is a former Minister of Defence. He seems too young for that, but he's from Albania, which is a NATO ally. And he's going to give us the perspective of his small but rapidly developing country. We have found out that Pierrot is an enthusiastic French speaker, so he spent some of his life in France. First of all, Lionel. Thank you, Leo. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Leo said, I'm going to just give a very brief introduction to our discussion, just to talk about the backdrop to this issue. The first part of the introduction will be to explain why we have this significant defence and rearmament effort. It's really important to perhaps mention a few of the figures in that. And then after that, I'm going to talk about why and how this defence effort can change the situation for manufacturing industry in Europe. So why is today such a key time for the defence industries? As Leo said, there are two major events that have taken place. First of all, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which has led to us considering Russia to be a major threat for the first time since the collapse of the USSR. That's happened at the same time as the US security guarantee is starting to appear much less unconditional than it once was. So Europe really needs to rearm in order to defend itself. It's taking place at a time where we're in a situation with a high level of dependency. Let me give you a few figures that highlight this dependency. These figures come from the SIPRI statistical organization. Between 2020 and 2024, over those 4 years, 64% of European imports in arms and weapons came from the USA. We are highly dependent on the US, and this was 12 percentage points up on the previous period, so this dependency has increased. Another point that I'd like to raise on this matter is that some responses have been provided, very large-scale results. In March 2025, the European Commission has put in place the REARM program, which has a 800 billion euro budget, including 400 billion pounds in lending as part of the SAFE program. In 2025, at the Hague summit, NATO allies agreed to raise their military spending to 5% of their GDP by 2035. It's not 5% on weapons and arms. It's 3.5% for weaponry and 1.5% for infrastructure and resilience. In France, just 2 days ago, on the 1st of July, the Parliament voted a 36 billion euro increase in military spending in the 2026-2030 period. So by 2027, the budget for defence will have been doubled as compared to 10 years ago. So that does highlight the very significant increase in military expenditure in France. These efforts and these promises for defence funding are significant because they provide opportunities for manufacturing industry. It will lead to significant reindustrialization within the defence sector. Europe does have some significant assets with regard to the defence industry. I wouldn't say that we have a European industrial base, but we do have national industries. And I think one of the key issues is to think about how we go from a range of individually juxtaposed national policies to create a overarching European defence policy. So this spending increase is very important in order to rearm Europe, but it's not enough to build a European defence industry. The Draghi report highlighted 3 key symptoms. The first of these symptoms is that in the United States you have 30 major arms systems. In Europe you don't have 30, you've got 178 different major arms systems. You can see why the production runs are much shorter. There's a lot of duplication in R&D, and there is very limited interoperability. That's why we need to build a European defence industry in order to move out of these domestic silos. The second symptom is that there is very little shared purchasing. Shared and common purchasing, pool purchasing is only 18%, and the aim of European member states is 35%. The third symptom is that we're generally buying our arms outside of Europe. Since February 2022, most recent figures, 3/4 of all new purchase orders were placed outside Europe. I'm going to hand over to our different speakers to ask how we can build a European defence industry, how we can consolidate orders and get common standards within the sector and promote major European programmes. Unfortunately, the Franco-German SCAF programme wasn't a good example. The Germans and French haven't been able to agree. Apparently things are going a bit better for tank development, but it's not as easy as one might think. Thank you very much, Lionel. Without further ado, I'm going to ask a first question. I'm going to turn to Philippe Mills. How can we switch from a domestic French defence industry, what role can the French industry play in rearming Europe? Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to, very honoured to be here and be part of this panel. I come from the generation in France that did military service. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud. I served in the mechanized infantry division. I was told that I was on the second line. I was the one who was going to end up getting all of the nuclear and chemical weapons from the Warsaw Pact countries. Luckily, that didn't happen, and I'm here to tell the story today. I'm delighted to be on this panel today because, in geopolitical terms, Europe is standing on its own, and it's very important that in defence issues that it draws on all of its great potential. So the question is, what can French defence industry do? I think there's a major role for French defence industry to play. We've got fairly few leading industrial sectors in France, but the defence industrial base is a significant sector in France. It's a very comprehensive economic network. It's not very dependent on other countries. We're the second place exporter of arms, mainly because of the drop in Russian export, but also because France's exports have been increasing. And as the two previous speakers have said, the investment requirements are massive. The European Union has estimated it at 800 billion euros. And the fact that we've got an experience of war in Ukraine, which is an asymmetric type of war with a lot of innovation. And so we need a high level of European cooperation. We need to ensure genuine European cooperation. And what do I mean by genuine European cooperation? I mean that Europe needs to get serious about its slogans. It needs to be serious about this idea of strategic autonomy. There are two steps required in order to get there, and two principles that need to be put in place. The first step, Leonel talked about it, is this head-spinning figure that 2/3 of military imports come from the USA. US military hardware represents 2/3 of arms import. It's vital to reduce this level to a much lower level over the years to come. It's vital that we have a European preference for military hardware. You might have already heard that US hardware is subject to a regulation called the ITAR regulation, which allows the US government to control the destination and use of any military equipment. When we had this episode where Trump was talking about Greenland, which is part of Denmark, Denmark had bought F-35. The Speaker of the Danish Parliament said it was wrong for us to buy F-35 because the ITAR clause covers F-35. So I think this is perhaps the first step, reduce our dependency on US imports. And the second step, quickly, says the moderator, is that we need to develop European specialities. Before we build an Airbus in the defence sector, we're here in a business forum. Each country does have comparative advantages. France has the Rafale aircraft. Germany has the Leopard tank, the Leopard tanks. So perhaps we could say we need to buy the best equipment from our neighbours rather than going to buy hardware from outside Europe. That's the second step. There are two principles. We need to accept the reality of specialisation. For France, what does that mean? We are the only country that has a nuclear strike force. So France needs to be a leader in terms of carriers and in terms of digital technology, because it's necessary for the nuclear strike force. another point is innovation. The war in Ukraine highlights the need for innovation rather than producing high levels of stocks. There's no point in producing 100,000 drones for nothing. The final point is to remain open to the world and continuing to export defence equipment, because it will remain necessary in order to fund the research and development for the European defence industry. Exports will fund the R&D. I would like Rafales to be bought in Eastern European countries, not just in the Middle East and Asia. We're going to turn to Thomas Silberhorn. From a German perspective, you might hear some contradictions in what has said, and you might have a point of view to share about that. But Thomas Silberhorn, when we talked together ahead of this panel, you talked about two key conditions for the reindustrialization of European countries in connection with the defence industry. Could you perhaps talk to us a little bit about that? Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you allow me, I'd like to carry on in English. It'll be a bit easier for me. So the non-English speakers will need to get a headset at this stage to listen to French interpretation. Yes, go ahead. You can speak in English.
First, we have to realize that we are in a completely different geopolitical situation. We are witnessing an imperialistic Russia. The Russian territorial ambitions do not end in Ukraine. That's what Putin is saying for years already. Russia is threatening also Moldova, the Baltic countries, many European Union member countries. We are subject of Russian, not only espionage, but sabotage, cyber attacks every day, hybrid warfare every day, even murders in our European Union member countries. This is reality today. At the same time, we are confronted with a different US administration. Trump has questioned solidarity among NATO member countries, and there is a bipartisan approach in the American society that the Europeans should do more on our defense. And in this context, I was, yes, you're right. We relied on the United States 80 years after the end of the Second World War. We all benefited 30 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, after German reunification and European Eastern enlargement. We benefited 30 years from a peace dividend. And now the Americans tell us, you Europeans, you Germans should do more for your defense. You can buy our ammunition, you can buy our weaponry, but you have to shoot for yourselves and you have to die for yourselves in case of emergency. That's what we hear from the US administration. So indeed, you're right. We stand alone in the end as Europeans. And we have to draw the consequences from this. We have to invest more in our own security and defense. We have to strengthen our defense alliances in NATO and the European Union. We have to cooperate more closely, yes. And we have to realize that any conflict on European territory has a direct impact on us. We cannot escape from our responsibility. This is my first lesson. We have to, or my priority lesson we all have to learn. We can no longer escape from our own responsibility for our security in Europe. We cannot look aside and say, this war in Ukraine doesn't matter for us. That's a discussion in Germany. It's not our war. Yes, it is. We have more than 1.3 million Ukrainian refugees in Germany alone. This war in Ukraine destroyed our entire European security architecture. All the treaties we had with Russia, even between NATO and Russia, all the contracts have been broken, are obsolete, are no longer in force, or or applicable, no longer applicable. So the entire European security architecture is no longer at place. We have to, and that's why we cannot escape from looking aside. We can also not escape from transferring our responsibility to anybody else. For example, to the European Union. European cooperation can help a lot, but it cannot substitute our own efforts. We have to act on our own. And that's why my first claim is, in any case of emergency, we have to be capable as Europeans to defend our territory, to cooperate. The only restrictions we have is not money, is not industrial capacities. The first restriction, the first constraint is time and personnel.
So
and
this
in
is
terms
from
of
a German
time,
viewpoint. This is from a German viewpoint.
If
money
you just
is not
give
a
me
problem.
For us, money is not the problem. We lifted all the fiscal constraints. That's a political decision. This means we accept new burdens, new debts, hundreds of millions of new debts. But the task has to be done. And the constraint we are suffering from is personnel and time, and that's why industrial cooperation is key. Our industry extended production lines significantly. So far, they can already do more than we can order from the public sphere. Right now, we are producing more ammunition in the European Union than in the United States, though the capacities are here, and the aim is industrial resilience. So we have to reduce our dependencies from anybody outside of Europe, and be capable enough to fulfill our demands by our own industry. And the second point I want to make is...
So just in one phrase, please.
Technological innovation. Civilian and military development goes in line right now. So we are witnessing a significant improvement of technology, both in the military and civilian sphere. And this means that all the investments in defense now contribute to raise the baseline of civilian industry as well.
Okay. Merci. Olivier Girard, on vient d'en...
Thank you very much. Olivier Girard, we've just heard that money is not the issue. From a French point of view,
we are making debts, but it's political decision.
Oui, voilà. Mais on a décidé que ce serait plus un problème pour l'Allemagne.
apparently Germany has decided that money is no longer an issue. France has just voted through an increase of 36 billion euros, but compared to Germany, the defence budget is only going to account for half of the German budget. It's a complete switch in quite a short time period, actually, but we know that France is a highly indebted country. So, to ask the question in a different way, can such a highly indebted country defend itself? Will the money exist to do it? It's a difficult question, and I'm not a French MP, so I'm probably not in such a good position to answer the question as my neighbour, but I'm going to try and answer it. Accenture is a European leader in technology. We are helping Europe to reindustrialize. I also did military service at the French embassy in Warsaw a number of years ago. We've been talking a lot about this idea of spending more. It's a very French attitude, but I think we should spend at least as much time talking about spending better, spending things a lot better, because the context for French defence industry and the context of warfare is very different. Let me give you a few examples. The defence industry can meet some of the most incredible engineering challenges in the world. To make a nuclear submarine is incredible, and French industry can do that. But the new challenge we have is about production volumes, and our defence industry is set up to do that. There are manufacturers that can do this. It can manufacture at low cost and be ready to produce weapons in high volumes. That's the first thing. The second thing is that warfare doesn't take place just on the front line. We've got a lot of examples in mind. It's shifted from the front line to vulnerable infrastructure. There's cyber warfare, and we've seen in Ukraine how it's important to defend key infrastructure. Warfare takes place much less on the front line than in the past. Another issue is interoperability, the penetration of AI and big data, in particular on the front line. Critical systems is really important, and AI can help armies to work together with different type of equipment. We talked about 178 different types of military equipment. There is a digital orchestration that needs to take place, and it's probably at the heart of the battle, and that's why we talk quite a lot about C2, control and command. That's a different way that we need to work. There are procurement processes, the way that we use our defence spending. It's an absolutely vital thing. When a drone development cycle that takes weeks, we can't have a procurement cycle that takes years. We need to completely rethink the way that we engage the defence industry. There are a score of companies in France that make over 1 billion, but there's loads of companies which make less than that, and there is an issue of getting finance through to those smaller companies. That's a key issue. And the final point, we need to see greater synergy between civilian and military industry, not just in terms of cost savings, but in terms of maintaining the industry in operation. Simplification, it's also a key issue for tomorrow. So this is all about transforming manufacturing industry, both in the public and the private sector. So it's all about spending money better, which is just as important as spending more money. Thank you very much.
Pierrot Van Gogh, Olivier Girard just gave us a snapshot of how the war in Ukraine has changed our idea of conflict itself and the impact that it has on the industry. According to you, what are the keywords here for an army and an industry that is capable to face conflicts? As a former minister in charge of these questions, thank you all. I'm very happy to be here, and I would like to thank the Cercle de l'Économiste for this invite. I completely agree with the previous speaker in the dilemma of spending better, spending more, spending better, not only on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, but on all the lessons drawn from the conflict between Israel and Iran. On both sides of making war today, of waging war today, must produce some lessons and instruct the political decisions. Let me explain myself. In the last few years, we realized that the scope of war is everywhere. There's no distinction between the front line and the society, the back, the rear. It's very important to keep in mind when you have to make a budget, a fiscal decision. The second point is the case of Ukraine and the case of Iran and Israel. Make us realize that an army is capable to defend as much as the people, the capacity of a people to resist. It's proportionate to that. And this has to feed the logic of spending in terms of technology, because the technology that is the progress for military equipment are not enough, but we also invest in the rear, where we don't have any technological equipment, but we have maybe information equipment. So the topic of war has also changed. We still have the critical infrastructures, technology, AI, energy, all of that, of course, that was mentioned previously by all my colleagues on the stage. But also, from an intelligence point of view, there's a very important dimension. We often talk about AI. Albania, having been, like most European countries recently, the target of hybrid operations, quite complex and intensive. We realize that when we look at social network, social media, and all the information platform, we also created some artificial attention. It's there's not. We talk about artificial intelligence, but we should also talk about artificial attention. In all the societies today, we don't make the line between democracy and circulating a message. Democracy is about agreeing on the goals, not only a way of circulating the messages. So that also changes the complete nature of wars today. What is the European dilemma? The European dilemma, we all realize after 3 years of increase of the defense budget in all the NATO countries, that it's not enough to spend. Spending in itself is not enough to create industrial lines, so economic resilience and innovation. And it's very true when we look at, we talked about briefly, I believe, the spending commissioning policies, purchasing policies. Yes, Europe talked a lot about the USA, and because it's an umbrella in terms of security from the Eastern Bloc. But it's easier to do business in terms of defense with the US. And Europe in the last few years has not thought at all about or reforming the policies and the instruments of public procurement in technology and AI or in defense. And this is a very concrete situation that we're facing now. Particularly for small NATO countries, it's complicated to do some big spending in terms of technology and defense. If we want to follow the rules of the EU, so it's very often a solution, an easy solution, because of the innovation and technology that the US are providing. I have another idea that I want to develop. It's an idea that we find with Marc Bloch, for example, is that the defeats, material or technological, or training defeat, learning defeats, we have at the moment in Europe 2 very strong models that illustrate very well what Europe could mobilize. Is a French model, which I believe is in Albania we got inspired by it very much. We have a small DGSA because we try to recreate an industrial base of defense in Albania. We were overproducing military equipment. We're the North Korea of Europe at the time. We had 220 bomber planes. Imagine fighter planes. Imagine for a small country of 3 million inhabitants, we had 1,500 tanks. Only Poland has more than us at the moment. So we went from overproduction to a phase of total privatization of all the production capacities. And now with this increase of the defense budget, we're trying to do our best not to lose momentum and not do what people can criticize us for. It's not enough to spend, but we need to produce added value. And Albania cannot produce at all in terms of defense and technology. Will remain a very modest ally, but we try to be part of the value chain of NATO. So what I'd like to point out is to spend on the front line, but to spend on the rear as well, to create this capacity of resistance that the Finns are very good at. The French know how to mobilize the strong forces of the nations, but the Finns know how to prepare the nation to resist to extreme scenarios of aggression. And thank you, Piero, sorry. Very interesting point of view that you shared with us. I will ask each of you again a question, and then we'll see if we have questions in the room. So Philippe Mills first, you say that we need to step away from the US, and you want, on the other hand, to push exports. So it's French protectionism, as traditional French protectionism. So sell to others. That's how I hear it as a German. how do you build an industrial model that is sustainable with that approach? First question. And second question, do you believe that in 5 years' time, because we have to rush here, Europe can be autonomous in its defense? And I will cut you off quicker than before. I'm sorry that you heard what I said this way, because I gave a precision that actually leans the other side. On the other side, I said that we have to specialize. We have to get more specialized. So France, for example, has stopped producing the Charles Leclerc, which is an excellent decision, because it is very likely, I don't know when the next, the tanks, the Leclerc tanks, sorry. I don't know when the next tank battle is going to take place, but I don't see it happening in the near future. Pirot, if I pronounce your name correctly, has very rightfully so quoted the Nordic countries. There's a former from the DGSA who's now in Sweden, because the AWACS plane that France had are going to be replaced by a Swedish model that we call Global Eye. So some countries in Europe have skills, and we need to work together and choose the best European equipment. What is France doing in that? In this specialization that you're talking about? France is specialized on vectors, digital defense, and missiles. For the topic that we were discussing on spending better, we also have to know who produces the mass production. That the French industry is going to have to specialize is an obvious fact. We're completely opposite of what you claimed when I was preaching protectionism. The fact that the full French model of army is not sustainable anymore, because it's what the ministry themselves call bonsai army, bonsai type of army. So we have to make some choices. And the French army has to specialize in certain fields. I think it will leave up to the Italians and the Germans. It will leave the Nordics do it as well. And there's a last point, and it's not linked to your question, but that was discussed by our minister. We need to think in Europe about the French spirits of defense. What is it? From a psychological point of view, are the European people and the Western European people who benefited from 80 years or 100 years of full peace, are they ready to go into a situation of war? You say French is indebted. That's true. French spends a lot in terms of public. It has a really high public spending. On some public spending, it's inefficient, and we could then that part could be reoriented towards military spending. But I'm not a protectionist. I need to clarify that. Thank you, Thomas. You have in France there is a very strong debate that got even stronger since the Chancellor Merz, your Chancellor, decommissioned the fighter plane. In Germany will reach 160 billion for defense budget. The SCAF, the double of France, with the little bonus that was just voted. And the Chancellor claims that the Bundesarmy must become the strongest army, the best army in Europe. My friends from the Financial Times recently wrote a paper called The New German Military Question. And the major question here is this military awakening in Germany, would it be European as well? For now, we don't really feel that way.
I understand all these feelings, but in the end, we have to step up our efforts in Germany, in France, in all European NATO member countries to re-establish deterrence in Europe in a way that is complementary to our transatlantic partners, but that is sufficient for our own. So deterrence of adversaries outside of Europe, this is the goal of our increase of our defense posture. And we have to understand as Germans that there might be no conflict on European territory that can be resolved without Germany. Who else should do it? So if there is any conflict in Europe that can be resolved by France or UK, we would be happy. Je vous en prie. But in Germany, our society tends to look aside and to say, well, this is not our business. And my political argument is, any conflict on European territory will be our business as a country located in the center, in the geographic center of this European continent. If there's anybody else who does the job, je vous en prie. But I have to tell the Germans, we have to take our responsibility. And that has to be done in a way that our partners in Europe, France and Poland, do not feel dominated by Germany, but feel invited to step in and to take their contributions.
But so, wouldn't that start with buy European? This is my question. Why isn't there a more buy European reflex by Germany?
First, I would say our ambition should be that all the core competences we need in defense industry are located in Europe. And yes, I have to concede, in previous times we came already far, we had more success already 10 years ago. We started this FCAS project after 2014, after the Wales summit of NATO. And the joint perception was that we have to be able to deliver in the future combat air system and a future fighter aircraft. However, the political agreement was a fair share of industrial competences. And the offer Airbus got from Dassault was, you can become the first supplier. First supplier is not co-production. This is not less than agreed on, it's completely different. By the way, Airbus is not a German company. It's not even a German-French company. It's a global player with a significant share of both France and Germany. And we should have a common interest in keeping the production competences of this global player in Europe.
Okay.
And when it comes to Rafale or to F-35, Germany needs a fighter aircraft for the nuclear role. So either we buy an American aircraft that can deliver this role of this nuclear role, or we can produce a European aircraft that has then be certified by the United States for the nuclear role. So this would mean to open European technology to the United States. So I can see from your reactions, this would not be your priority. That's why we bought F-35 for the nuclear role. But Germany will always need a second fighter aircraft for all the other roles.
Là, on touche les spécificités.
This is where we touch upon the specificities of the German army, which is in charge of transporting nuclear bombs, American nuclear bombs. Olivier Girard, sorry. To get back to reindustrialization, we talked about the automotive manufacturers. If we take the example of Renault, in Le Mans they're planning to build some drones, some military drones. The goal is to produce 600 drones per month. So that's going to, out of the 1,400 employees, workers at Le Mans, it's going to keep 30 of them busy for a budget of 30 million euros, which is drop in the water for Renault. The minister, Madame Bautrin, is saying that they went from 10,000 drones in order the booking, knowing that in Ukraine they produce 10,000 a day. So my question is, if we look at the volumes, is it really an industry that can replace something else? And can you help us get reindustrialized? This is a very good question. I want to say a word on what was said before. I joined this position in defense quite recently. I come from industry. I went around Europe and I was really struck by the situation, and we should really listen to the gravity of the words of my neighbor on the right. If you draw a line from Bucharest to Copenhagen, there's a real difference above this line that the society, in all its components, politics and population, is much more aware and realistic about this topic than what is below this line. I don't really know how to explain that, but I'm feeling it quite clearly. Our Dutch friends, who are 2.5 hours TGV ride from Paris, all the Dutch citizens received in their mailbox a little booklet on how to behave in situation of crisis or of major conflict. So the level of awareness above this line has nothing to do with the one that is below this line. And this is something that, so you're basically telling us that the French have not changed their mindset. No, they don't realize it fully. If I go back to the question of defense and volume, you have to understand it's a new value chain. Automobile, they had their R&D, and they would manufacture cars and produce, they would design the cars and produce millions of them. So this industry will know how to produce those volumes. It's a new value chain because the product is not designed by them directly. It's designed by other industrial players who know how to manage the cost and the demand and etc. And stocks. The drone industry is completely open at the moment. There's no entry barriers. It's a civil question, not only a military question. Nobody can face 250 drone producers. We need to organize this market. We need to scale it up. We need to have some European champions for drones, and that can be used by the European armies. So this question of organizing this market, I was talking about 20 companies above 5 billion and the ones that are below. We had a very simple proposal there. We talked a lot about the BITD. It's the industrial basis for defense. It's an acronym, BITD. It refers to the defense bases. And we have to help those military bases. And Europe must produce some standards in technology that are going to be sovereign. There's some very good solutions in France on the engineering and manufacturing, and we already have some sovereign cloud. Why? It's a proposal from Accenture. Why don't we say all these European companies should take up this management modules and processes to have interoperability between companies? Because we're going to have the same technology, we're going to use the same technologies, and would simplify our life. We must organize a bit better this market from an operational, financial standpoint. Thank you. Piero, you noted this revolution that we're living at the moment. The industry should adapt. Who do you believe in Europe is at the level of this and up to this evolution, except for Ukraine, obviously? To join into what Olivier said, of course there's some European champions, but the rules of the European markets today don't allow us to favor the European champions. This is, by the way, the whole topic at the budget, pluriannual budget at the EU. We talk a lot about. We were going back to the Gaullist period. Even our British friends are claiming that they're for de Gaulle at the moment. So we need to have a power. We need to exert it on a territory, on a region, on an area. And for us in Southeast Europe. That's the territory that we're concerned with. It should also be the Mediterranean region, not only Ukraine. In terms of Mediterranean and defense, the naval industry does not seem to be the priority for everyone, and it's a shame. That's the first point. Second point, if Europe, which is as a power, wishes to champion their own production, it has to be made very simple for member states. Albania is part of it, but if you want to be a member of the EU, not just to drag down the union, but to bring something to the table. So that's why our defense budget is 2.5% of the GDP. We are renovating all our old factories that were producing tractors and producing manufacturing explosves. So you imagine the big plants we had in the communist era. So we renovate all of that by signing partnerships from state to state, state to company. We try to innovate on these topics, not necessarily by following all the rules, the traditional rules followed in the past, but this is exactly what Germany is doing, like Thomas said. We step out of the traditional legal framework and we imagine different types of cooperation, private, private, or whatever. And Europe has not integrated it in its legal framework. I'm being told that our time is running up. We have 1 minute to go left. So I want to keep my promise by asking questions from the room. The gentleman in the first row has a question. If you have others, please feel free to come up to the speakers. We're just going to take one question for everyone, just one. I have so many questions. The military service in Germany, are you going to reestablish this? Is the FD going to block your efforts? Aren't you missing on staff in the military industry? We need technicians, but soldiers. And I hear that you don't have a lot of people that are under the flags. Too many questions. The deputy will answer to you separately because we're going to have a German panel next time. The gentleman in the back, and then we'll stop there. Thank you for this very interesting debate. I have a question for Philippe Mills. Thomas explained his vision of the failure of the SCAF project. It was his vision. Do you, Philippe, consider that the French are responsible of this failure? Like Thomas explained, Dassault is he to blame? Did the French did not know how to take into account the German interest? Could have done it anywhere else. Could we have done it in a different way? To fail, it takes two people to fail. And I think the responsibility here is shared. I think that, if I understood correctly, that the model of planes was not the same, wished by the Germans was not the one that the French wished to have, and that it failed for technical reasons. And the second answer is that there could be another cooperation with another country than France. So we'll see that maybe it's not just a French-only idea to keep on top of this production. I give back the floor to Lionel Rago for the conclusion. 2 words to conclude. Just a point. You asked a question on Renault by saying the order is 10,000 drones, and that's what Ukraine produces in a day. We shouldn't make those type of comparisons, because the goal is not to have Europe produce what Ukraine produces, because Ukraine is fighting every day for its survival. So we need to be able to do that if we have to we are getting into a major conflict with Russia. We need to build up our capacities to do it, which is to give an idea. And I'd like to conclude by saying next year we could have this session again by keeping the same title, but that rephrasing it a bit, is the reindustrialization of Europe not a blocking point for a European military union? We see that Germany has difficulties in the automotive sector. France is trying to reindustrialize. Germany tries to avoid reindustrialization. So there are some challenges that are different between the countries. Who is going to be a leader and who's going to have the industrial sector strong enough to do that? So this competitiveness inside of Europe could be a blocking point for the construction of a common European defense. So the title could be switched around next year. Thank you very much.